All right, hello everyone. This is Tori Behrens, and I'm going to kick this meeting off, and then George is going to lead you through the webinar today. And George and I were just talking. If you attended the call on Friday, this is going to be a repeat of that session. And of course, we may have new questions and answers as we move into the questions and answer section, and you're more than welcome to sit and listen to this session again. But though we're doing it live, right? It's not a recorded session that we're just playing. We're doing it live. And then today's session is also going to be recorded, and George will go over more of those details. We appreciate everybody joining, and I'm not going to take up too much time here at the beginning. As you guys know, George is the project manager on the Embedded Business Intelligence project. You've been receiving emails from him, including this memo that he's displaying on his screen. That memo had one version update, which just updated some of the dates, which you can see in the bottom portion of George's screen. And we know that the analytics and the business intelligence is a high priority for everyone and all of our clients. And we know that we're all trying to get more out of our data and our technology assets. So the first thing with BI is that, and this is true with business intelligence and artificial intelligence and machine learning, to have an effective technology project, we have to first have data in good shape. And the nice thing about the tool with ENFOS is that we're using your embedded data. So as the customer, you don't need to worry about the shape of your data, right? It's already there and it's already being managed through ENFOS. There's lots of data, as you guys know. There's project data, site data, contact data, and documents. You might have other data like calendar or environmental data or compliance. And then you certainly have some financial data for your plans, your vendor POs or work releases, and of course your invoices. You have all of this data and it's all in ENFOS. What you don't need to worry about is that the data sets already exist and that they're clean and that they're normalized. Over time, of course, we're adding more data sets. And that's a work in progress, something that the team is working on now, things like additional information, more environmental and compliance data, but the majority of that data is already there and ready for reporting. We're kicking this off, this BI project, with an ENFOS directed stage, and the details of that are described in the memo. Our launch would be considered a soft launch, and this means that it's already been released to your production system. George will talk more about that. But we believe this is an effective way which will include, all of the security and the permissions that you expect. And we needed a methodical approach to bring on the user base. So we're starting, with these webinars with power users and administrators like you guys on the call. And through time, you guys will be able to release more reports and dashboards to your user team. And George is going to show you the permissions for that and how to release that. So there's a few things to keep in mind for the overall process. To deliver this performance information to your team. You're going to have drivers such as the performance management and trend analysis. Those will be the first step in the process to determine what you're going to want to show in your report. The next step, they move on to the data scientists, and they determine, how do we best represent the data? Maybe it's in tabs or tabular or chart formats, and they're converting these business needs into a technical specification. And George has done those first two steps in this process we're going to show, right? Then there's the development stage, and these are the people who have the technical skills to create these outputs, reports, and crosstabs. Again, George is going to show you what he did to build out some of this data already. Finally, there's the delivery, and that's, who and when this information is needed. And are those dashboards specific to certain roles, like executives, project managers, or administrators or other users? And then finally, as always, right, there's feedback loops on if they got it right, is it useful, and what tweaks need to be made. So analytics and the whole BI process, it goes through the workflow of first the business need, into the data scientists, the developers, finally the users, and then the feedback loops. Here at ENFOS, we are really excited to get this rolling and into production, and we wanted to thank everyone again for their time today and all the feedback that you'll give us. With that, I'm going to hand it over to George.
Thanks, Tori, and hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today. Like Tori said, we're excited to have BI on production. So ENFOS has been working as a team on this project for the last almost 2 years. Some of you were at our last ENFOS Experience conference and got to see the initial stages of the embedded BI in ENFOS. We're calling it Data Insights, and I'm going to walk you through the permissions, how to build ad hocs and reports, and how to design dashboards today. The webinar is going to be broken up into about a 60-minute demo, and then we're going to leave 20 to 30 minutes at the end for any questions or review items that you may have. For those questions, there is a panel in the GoToWebinar that should be called Questions, where you can submit written questions directly to us, and we'll go through all of those at the end. To start, I'm going to review the BI memo that Roger sent out a few weeks ago. This is version 2, so the dates have been updated slightly. And once we do that, we'll jump into the permissions in the ENFOS test system. So BI was released to production on March 1st of this year. Some of you have already received access to it based on your permissions. This has been limited to just the user administrators at this point. The actual data that ENFOS is using is all of your production data from yesterday. So every night we take a copy of the production data, denormalize it into its own database on its own server, and make that available for reporting the next day. This data is structured in a way where you can reference things that don't have a common connection when using just the regular ENFOS modules. So if you want to look at AOC summary data against invoice data, or compliance permit data against environmental chemistry data, that's all being worked on. So some of the data sets like invoice and PO data are already linked and available with table joins. More complex things like compliance permitting and electronic data deliverable results are not yet available, but they're coming and will be released in batches throughout the year. So for what's available currently, we are working in stage 1, the ENFOS directed stage with customer exploration. What this means for you is that ENFOS is releasing about a half dozen dashboards that you can review, use as needed, change if you'd like, and release to your users. This is not the stage where ENFOS is going to be directly helping you design the dashboards and reports that you want to see. For the dashboards that we're releasing, we're doing this on kind of a weekly basis, rolling these dashboards out to all of our clients. We've already released one dashboard, which has been on production for about a week now, called the ENFOS Approved Invoice Advanced Search Visualization. We'll take a look at that dashboard later in the call. This week we're working on an additional dashboard based around purchase orders. You may call them work authorizations or work releases or contract releases, but we're calling it the purchase order balance dashboard. In the coming weeks, we'll be releasing a planning dashboard, a portfolio program dashboard, and then some dashboards specifically for the user administrators focusing around user status and operation logs. After we release all those dashboards, we'll schedule another webinar to review them together, answer any questions, and at that point, we're getting close to starting stage 2, which is the transition to customer directed. So with that, I'm going to move over to test.enfos.com and let's take a look. So I'm in test.enfos.com, and the BI platform Data Insights is available on test and production only. So there's no BI Data Insights on the integration system, only test.enfos and p.enfos. So I'm already logged in here, and I'm going to look at my user permissions. So I'm under my user account summary, looking at my user privileges, and there's two new permissions. They're both under the admin group. The first one is called BI admin, and the second one is called Data Insights. BI admin is specifically meant for the user administrators and BI super users. This is an add delete permission that gives the users access to all users' reports, ad hoc views, and dashboards. So this is the person who may be publishing reports for other people. You may be doing this just for yourself, or you may be publishing them for other people to use. In the instance where you're creating dashboards for other folk, you'll need this BI admin permission. The Data Insights permission is more for the everyday users. This is where you can restrict users to a view-only look at Data Insights, or give them access to create their own via the add delete permission. For those users that have the Data Insights add delete, they will only have access to save to their private folder. So they don't have the ability to save things publicly for other users to see. So just a quick recap, the BI admin is really for the administrators and super users, and the Data Insights is for the everyday user using Data Insights for their personal use. With these two permissions, they enable an entire new submodule under reporting. This submodule is called Data Insights, and this is where we've embedded the BI engine into ENFOS. It's made of 4 submodules that we can see here. The first one is Home. Home is where you can view reports and dashboards that have already been created and released. So you could think of this as your report repository. The editor, very straightforward. This is where you can edit reports and dashboards that have already been saved. Going back to the permissions, if you have the BI admin permission, you have the ability to edit everyone's reports. Whereas if you have the Data Insights permission, you only have the ability to edit your own reports. New ad hoc and new dashboard are the remaining 2 submodules, and those respectively allow you to create individual reports and dashboards that contain multiple reports. So before we get into the new ad hoc, I just want to make it known that we do have a specific support link set up for all BI related questions, and that is bisupport@enfos.com. I think almost everyone on this call already has production access to Data Insights. So if you do start getting into Data Insights this week or next week and have questions, please send those questions to bisupport@enfos.com. This goes to our same support system that our standard support at ENFOS goes to, and the same team's going to be looking at those questions and categorizing them. So from the reporting module, I'm going to go to Data Insights New Ad Hoc. I am going to close my left panel here just because I want a little more screen real estate. And the first page that pops up is the domain selector. For all of you, you should only see one domain in production, and that will be a domain that's named by your owner name. So I'm going to select the ENFOS domain, and that takes me to this next page. This next page is the first step in defining what data I want to use to make the reports. Each of these sections in my source window is called a data set. Each data set is a collection of fields and measures. So for this activity planner data set, this is going to be all of the fields that are in the site activity calendar. So I can see under the activity planner, we've got status, type, references, contacts, and details about the activities. For these data sets, to select them, you have two options. You can take the entire data set and drag it into the selected fields. Or you can take individual fields by opening the data set in the source column and moving them over. There's two ways to do this. You can see I've just been dragging and dropping them across the page. You can also use these arrow buttons in the center. On the left side of the page here, there's two sections that you'll like. The fields is the primary section, and the pre-filters is the second section. Display and save as topic are not currently implemented. Pre-filters is a page that allows you to pre-filter your selected data. So if I know that I only wanted to see activities from January 1st, 2019 and beyond, I could use my activity target date field. There we go, target date. And I could set a filter for from January 1, 2019 and later. You can also do this from the editor page, which I prefer because it's easier to change it if you decide that you like something else. So I'm going to select a data set. Got one here called Site Information. And I can see that all of my other data sets are now grayed out. What this means is that I don't have an active join between this data set and these other data sets. If I select a different data set, if we've got another one called Site Information here, this one is linked to lab data. So this would be the EDD chemistry and field details. My PO summary data set I can see is linked to the proposal summary, proposal with WBS, it's your work breakdown structure, invoice details, and AOC information. So if there's a specific data set that you would like to create reports or queries against that you don't currently see in production, send us an email at bisupport@enfos.com and we'll prioritize which data sets are going to be released to production based on our user feedback. So I'm going to select my site information data set again. I can expand it and see that this is all of the fields from the site summary if I were at the site level. Something to keep in mind is that we have not released the custom names for financials and hierarchy yet. So that's something we're working on. We do have about 3,000 fields to rename for each client. So that's a big project for us. So right now, all of the field and measure names and data sets will be using the ENFOS generic terminology. So you may call an AOC a project or an opportunity or a task code. But for now, that's just going to be called an AOC in ENFOS. So I've selected my data set, and I'm going to click OK in the bottom left corner. This takes me to the editor view. This is really broken up into 4 parts. Parts 1 and 2 are these blue and purple sections on the left side of my page. This is where we see the data sets that we've selected from the previous source domain page. If I expand these, I can see all of the fields and measures. The difference between fields and measures are that the fields are things like valid values and alphanumeric fields within ENFOS. The measures are going to be the numeric values. So latitude and longitude are actually fields. So this is something that we're going to move over to the field section instead of measures. We're not going to see a lot of measures in the site and AOC information data because we're not storing financial data there. But if we were looking at the invoice summary or the PO summary data sets, we would see just as many measures here as we do see fields. So that's parts 1 and 2, fields and measures. The center section is really where we're creating the charts and reports that we want to see. So we'll take a look at that very shortly. And this right panel is our filters. Filters are going to be similar to the pre-filter that we could select from the data set page, but we can edit them at will while we're working on the report. So this is all drag and drop. So I'm going to find a field called site state, and we're going to create a very simple ad hoc view. I'm moving my site state up to my columns row, and I can see that for this dummy data, we've got a bunch of states and provinces. Maybe I'd like to see how many sites are in each state or province. And to do that, I'm going to need to use the site name and do a count of the site name. Now there's 2 ways to do this. One is to right-click on the field for site name and use the Use as Measure button. We can see that that sent it down to my purple measures section, and I now have a measure called site name. When I drag that up into my columns, I can now see that I've built a kind of weird looking pivot table. Now, just like if you're using Excel and creating a pivot table, the structure of the table or crosstab that you're viewing is dependent on the orientation of the columns and rows. So I know that my site name is less unique than the site state. So I'm going to move my site name above my site state. You can now see that with this data, we've got a total of 376 sites. And if I break that out, we see it broken out into a count by location. The other way to create a measure, I'm going to remove that measure, is to go to this purple measures bar and use the Create Calculated Measure button. This is for more complex measures, and this product has a ton of pre-existing functions that you can use, as well as all the basics that we see across the top here. So I'm going to create a custom measure called site count, and I'm going to look for a function called count all. When I select count all, I get a description of the function on the right side of my page and what it's looking for. So it's looking for a field name and a level. If I read the note here, I can see that the level requires the word current as the default. So I'm going to double click count all, and it populates into my formula builder. Now I already know that the field that I want to count is called site name. So before I do that, I'm going to move my site name back to field. And now that it's a field again, I'm going to input the field name, site name there. And based on that description on the right, I'm going to populate the default value of current. At the bottom, we have a function validator, which says successful. This formula builder is type specific. So if I try to do a lowercase c and validate it, it's going to throw an error. So always make sure that your field names defined and your levels defined match what it's showing in screen. Change that back to a capital C and we're good to go. You can also do things here like sum fields together, create custom calculations, apply percentages, concatenate fields, really anything that you might be able to do in an Excel formula, there's a way to do it here. I'm going to click the Create Measure button, and I now see I have a new measure called Site Count in my Purple Measures section. I'm going to drag that up into my chart, and it looks like we have the same odd-looking cross-tab pivot table as before. So once again, I'm going to move my state below my site count, and using the plus expand button, I can now see a distribution of sites by state or province. And I can also see that there are 20 in which there is no data populated in the site summary. So that may be an indicator that I should go in and fix that data. So this is just a simple cross-tab view, but what if we wanted to see this as a chart? The default when creating an ad hoc is always cross-tab, which is shown in this little drop-down selector. By selecting this drop-down, I can move over to my chart. The page refreshes, and ENFOS will always show you the least amount of data. And I have a new field that's populated in my filters called the data level. By moving my data level to the right, I now see my counts broken out into the individual states and provinces. Hovering over one of them, I can see the value. So in Ohio, this data has a site count of 50 sites. Now, just like earlier where we rearranged the site count and site state, I can change the look of my chart based on whether things are columns or rows. So if I move my site state to the rows section, adjust my data level again back to the right, I now see a different view where we've lost the color and we're just seeing single color site counts by state or province. The default's always going to be a column chart like this, but there is a gear icon in the top left corner with an option to select the chart type. So if I click that chart type button, I get a pop-up with about 24 different charts that I can change this data to. So if I want to view this as a pie chart instead, I'll come down to my pie chart selection, and I only want a single pie chart instead of the dual level pie. Click that, and we can see that the pie chart updates. I have the option to add a title here. So this is a site count by state, province pie. And there's a second option under the gear icon to change the chart format. So by clicking that button, I get a new page that pops up. And this allows us to do things like change the angle of the axis labels, change our location of our legend. So maybe I want my legend on the right, and I don't want to show the measure name, which is site count displayed here. By clicking apply, I can see my legend now jumps over to the right, and my chart gets a little bigger to fit the screen. There's two other tabs in this chart format page: appearance, which is specific to line and area, scatter and bubble charts, and advanced. We're not going to get into advanced today, but this is the ability to add specific properties to this chart. So this is very basic JavaScripting. So if I wanted to define a specific width, I may do legend width and define the number of pixels wide that it is. There's more information about these advanced properties by clicking this more information link, and that'll take you to a page with a bunch of optional properties that you can use for charts. So we've got our chart now. I'm actually going to move back to a bar chart. So I'm going back to my gear icon, chart types, and I'm going to select my first bar chart. Now in this view, our legend is not particularly useful because we only have the single color. So I'm going to go back to my chart format, go to my labels section, and remove the legend by selecting none. And I can see that legend now disappears. So we've got our chart, but what if we want to filter based on a different value? Maybe I only want to see sites that are in the United States. I'm going to find the field for site country in my left panel. When I right-click on it, I have another option called Create Filter. Creating Filter sends the field or measure over to my left panel filters section. And there are a ton of options for these filters. The default is going to be equals, and I would have to select a single value. So equals United States of America, and at the bottom, I'll click Apply. I can now see which sites have been assigned with the country United States of America. And I know there's a lot more sites than this. So this tells me that my country field is not populated at all of my sites. So this may be data that I want to go back in and populate in my site summary. And this is a really good point to make, that ENFOS can only create charts and reports based on the data that you populate into ENFOS. So if you have partial data in the site summary or AOC summary or anywhere in ENFOS, then you're limited to creating reports based on that partial data. All of the data in ENFOS can be updated via import. So if you have any questions or want to set up a call on how to bulk import data that you can then use in this data insights, just shoot us a question over at support@enfos.com. So I did equals United States of America for my site country filter, but I can also do is one of. Is one of my preferred filters. And this allows me to select one or more filter. So I can see I have 4 different countries available, null value for those sites that have not been assigned. And when I click Apply, I now get back to my original chart. The benefit of having filters here is that once the filters are saved with the ad hoc, they can be used in dashboards later on and linked to multiple ad hocs in the same dashboard. So there's 3 ways to save this chart that we've created. The first way is just a display mode view. So this allows me to look at what the chart will look like outside of the editor using this eye icon. Clicking the eye icon again returns me back to the editor view. The second option is this export button. So you may not actually want to save the ad hoc view you're currently looking at, but maybe you want to print it off and use it elsewhere. So this allows you to export these charts or crosstabs directly to PDF, Excel, CSV, a Word document, and some other formats like PowerPoint down at the bottom. The third option is the most important one, and this is actually saving the ad hoc report in ENFOS. You have a couple options here. Since this is a brand new report, I am going to do Save Ad Hoc View As. The other option is to save ad hoc view and create report. For most purposes, you'll only need to use this save ad hoc view as. The create report comes in handy when you want to save and display a single report like this by itself. these ad hoc views are not directly visible if they're not put in a dashboard, but the reports are. So this distinction between an ad hoc view and a report is an important one. So the ad hoc views can be used in dashboards. The reports can be standalone or used in dashboards. When I save ad hoc view as, I have two options, the ENFOS folder or a personal folder. The ENFOS folder is for the BI admin permission holders, and this allows me to save this report or ad hoc as a public view. If I want to save it specifically to myself, I'd select my own folder. So I'm going to save this ad hoc view and give it a name here. And my name thing seems to be off screen currently, so we're just going to give it the default name. So I have my save was successful message flashes across the top here, and we've now successfully created a report. Or we've successfully created an ad hoc view, excuse me. So I'm going to move over to my new dashboard section and create something that all of the users in this test system can see. I now have a new page that's similar to the editor page, but I have some new options. In my left panel, I have the ability to create brand new content, so I could create charts or crosstabs directly through the dashboard page, or I could add things like tables, text pages, direct links to web pages, or images that I upload from my computer. I also see my existing content. I just saved this ad hoc view, and I can drag that onto my dashboard editor just by moving my mouse over. Now there is a bug in the test system currently where the ad hoc views don't load properly when building a dashboard. This bug is only in test and it is not in production. So if you're doing this in production, you won't see this unexplained error. Now that I've added my ad hoc view, I have the ability to add my filters. So I have a new filter section in the left panel, and I can move my filter over into the other side of the dashboard. A dashboard like this can have multiple filters, multiple ad hoc views, multiple text sections. And they're all just rearranged based on drag and dropping the edges. Some things to keep in mind that I find very helpful in the dashboard is when you right-click on a dashlet, which is what we call each one of these sections, each dashlet has its own properties. The properties allow us to do things like enable the export button with this checkbox. So I'm going to enable that checkbox and click OK. And that adds the export button directly to this dashlet. The other really important thing about the dashboards is this icon at the top that looks kind of like the ENFOS hierarchy icon, except sideways. And this is the parameter mapping dialog. And what this does is when I have more than one dashboard or more than one ad hoc view or report on my dashboard, I can link filters to each other. So we've only got the one ad hoc view, so there's nothing to link to itself here. But I have an example here from one of the production dashboards about what this page can look like when it's fully populated. So in production, you all have access to a ENFOS approved invoice advanced search dashboard, and it uses these mapping parameters. So there's two ad hoc views in that dashboard, an approved invoice base currency monthly and an approved invoice base currency yearly. And even though I've only have a single filter for each one of these field parameters, I've mapped those same parameters to both dashlets. So I can see that that plus icon allowed me to add additional lines where I've mapped the parameters and the filters to both dashlets. So this looks a little complicated, but it's very simple. It's just clicking the plus button, selecting the dashlet and the company and the field that you want to map the filter with. So what does the dashboard actually look like once we create it? Just like before, you can save the dashboard to either your personal or public folder if you have the BI admin permission, and you end up with something that looks like this. So this is the same dashboard that the filters up here are applied against, and this is the one that's available in production for those with permissions. So this is two different charts. We've got a monthly view and a yearly view, and there's about a dozen filters that can be selected at will from this dashboard. So we've got invoices approved between January 1st, 2018 and March 11th, 2019. I can change those dates if I want to see the last 5 years. I can change them if I just want to see the last 3 months. I can look for a specific PO, a specific invoice, things within a defined node path, or against a specific company. You can see there's this long scroll that I cannot scroll on the screenshot, but I can also do things like filter based on who approved the invoice, who the invoice was paid to, what proposal expense category it went against, whether it was reserve or ARO or environmental expense or any of the dozen others that we see common. And I can also break out these charts by WBS. So all of the ENFOS clients use different levels of WBS, but the generic names are phase, activity, element, and component. This dashboard that's in production allows you to break it out by phase, which is the top level of everyone's WBS. There's one other dashboard in production that's rolling out this week. So some of you may already have it, but we're rolling out everyone, then should be available by Friday. And this is the production purchase order balance dashboard. So this is a cross-tab view of each AOC or project or opportunity or task code, all of the POs that are in invoicing status against it, who the PO is against, and the PO details. So we've got things like the PO approved amount, the PO open amount, how much it's been invoiced against, and how much it's been invoiced against broken out by time and materials, unit, and tax. So we can see that for this dummy AOC, Naperville 01, we've got 3 different purchase orders or work releases or work authorizations with 3 different vendors, and we can see that breakout on this dashboard. The filters applied to this dashboard include PO status, PO company, AOC name, and site name. So there are just a handful of bugs that we're working on in test and production. One of them is this test-only bug with the unexplained error that only happens when building dashboards. So we're aware of that one and we're working on it. The other one is for complex dashboards or reports that have many fields and measures. You may get slow save times where it seems like the window freezes up, but really it's just ENFOS saving that new report with all of the fields and all of the data against the repository. So just wait until you get that save successful message and you're good to navigate away from the page. but it may take upwards of 60 seconds if your report has more than, say, 8 fields and measures. The other item we're working on is loading indicators. So just like that slow save time, we're working on adding loading indicators so that when you're saving, you actually see a grayed out window with a loading icon saying that ENFOS is working on the save. So with that, we've built a new ad hoc, we've built a dashboard, and we've looked at some examples of what you're seeing in production or will be seeing shortly. So that is the end of the demo portion of this webinar. So I'm just going to jump back to the memo for a second and review the dates, and then we'll open it up to Q&A. So go ahead and start sending your questions in the GoToWebinar panel, and we'll take a look at those one by one. So back at the webinar, we've already released the invoice dashboard for everyone that's a SaaS client on production. We're working on the PO balance dashboard this week, and then next week we'll be starting a planning dashboard. And the week after that, a portfolio dashboard will come. Any questions that you have, please send those over again to our BI dedicated support line, which is bisupport@enfos.com. So we've got a bunch of good questions here. The first one is the site measure, presume that we can filter out closed sites, etc. Yes. So this is a great question on filters and how filters work. And the answer is that you can combine filters. So if you want to only see sites that are both active and distributed by state or province, you'll add both the state field to your field and measure selector, and then you'll add a filter for the site status. So that allows you to filter for one or more site environmental statuses or facility statuses. Anything you see in your chart is going to be filterable based on the sites and measures that you select, or the fields and measures that you select and apply to your filters section. So we've got another question here. If you download the chart, can you specify that the data stays with the chart so that you can modify the chart in PowerPoint or Word? No. So when you download the chart, it's just the chart view. So it's almost like taking a screenshot. So once the chart's downloaded, the backup data that created that chart stays in ENFOS. What you can do, though, is instead of exporting the chart view, if you export the crosstab view into the Excel format, you'll end up with a format in Excel that you can then build off of with Excel charts. But no, if you export the chart view, it's just the chart view. It doesn't come with the underlying data. We've got another question here. With the invoice dashboard, can you filter out tax? Absolutely. So with the invoice by WBS data set that's available, there's all 4 levels of the WBS that can be used to create filters. So if I want to filter out the tax phase, I can do that. So let's take a look actually, and we'll do just that. So I'm going to go back to my editor, and I'm going to select the ad hoc view that we created earlier. Your editor view looks a little different than mine, and that's because we're working on how this editor page is going to look. But one thing that you all cannot do in production or test right now is delete things that are saved. So if you have any questions about how to delete or need something that you no longer need deleted, feel free to send those requests over to bisupport@enfos.com and we can delete them for you. So I'm opening my ad hoc view back up. And I'm going to go back to my source page and select a different data set. So I'm keeping with the domain, same domain. And I'm going to select the invoice with WBS data set instead. And I could have done this doing a brand new ad hoc report, but this is just sample data, so I'm just going to overwrite my site count dashboard or dashlet that we did earlier. So you've got invoice with WBS, and if I scroll down, I can see parts of the WBS here, activity, component, element, and phase here. If I create filter with the phase, my left or my right panel will open here, and I have the option to select is one of or is not one of, and maybe I only want to see 100 through 800. So now I'm not including reconcile or tax. So that's how I would exclude tax from a financial report. Alternatively, if you happen to use like an SAP sourced discount or tax information that comes in during the payment process, you can do things like create a custom calculated measure to filter out specific fields. So if I wanted to see my invoice amount minus the discount amount to get the paid amount, I could create a calculated measure for that. Next question, are audit responses going to be available as a source? Yes, they will. They're not available yet. So we prioritized the data sets that all of our clients have access to. So that's the ENFOS core. So that's the site, finance, and administration modules. In the coming weeks and months, we'll be releasing additional data sets around both the data module and the compliance module, which includes the compliance audits. Next question is the invoice dashboard. Oh, we already answered that one. Additional question actually. So can it be removed in a specific hierarchy? Like if you have tax in Canada and the US, can you remove it in just Canada? And the answer for that is no. If you create a filter, the filter applies across all of your data. So you'd need to do both a Canada and a US report. So Tori just pointed out a good point to me. The BI view does work hierarchically. So I'm at the owner node right now, but if I went down to a site or an AOC or project level, whatever report or dashboard I was looking at would show me just the data for that hierarchy. So you don't have to do everything at the owner node. If you want to create a report that's going to be site specific or AOC specific, you can build it at the site or AOC level. And when you jump between sites, that dashboard will update accordingly. So if you have a hierarchy level for country, US and Canada, you could create a single ad hoc or a single dashboard. And depending on which hierarchy you are currently viewing, the dashboard would update to reflect that information. Got another good question here. For the current dashboards released and the additional dashboards that ENFOS is releasing to production, can the BI admin users copy and change and modify them? Absolutely. So as long as you have the BI permission, you can go in and modify the existing dashboard that ENFOS has released. You can modify the ad hoc charts that are the basis of it, or you could save them as a new resource. That would be as simple as opening up each of the ad hoc views and doing save as and giving it a new name. And at that point, you could overwrite any of the filters or the data to your heart's content, and you would not impact the generic one that we've released for you. So yeah, that's just, if you want to edit what's already in production that we've released for you, just save a copy or modify the existing one. Both are doable. Another good question, once the dashboards are created, how does a user access the dashboards? And so that's all done under the Reporting Data Insights homepage. So for this demo owner, there aren't any dashboards. Well, we do have one dashboard, a public dashboard to select, but it's done with this icon in the top right corner. That's called a hamburger icon, and that's under Reporting Data Insights Home. And this allows me to select my reports, my dashboards, and my favorites. So we did not talk about favorites, and that's because we didn't look at a dashboard. But if we look at a dashboard, in the top left corner, there's an option to both save as favorite and set as the ENFOS login page. Adding it to my favorites allows me to have a quick select from this favorites tab in the home submodule, and setting as the ENFOS login page is very straightforward. Whenever I log into ENFOS, this will be the first dashboard or the first page that I see upon login. And that can be changed under your user preferences under the login page section. So there's now a page where you can select whether you want to see the action items, the new tab, or the Data Insights home. For the most part, action items is the most popular because those are your financials. So we've got one more question here. And that question is, I'm getting the raw data from ENFOS. What are the other solutions? So this goes back to the question about if I export a chart to Excel, how do I get the data behind it? So there's a couple ways to do this. We already talked about exporting the cross-tab view or the table view also, but you've always got the ENFOS reports, which are just under Reporting Run Reports. So there's almost 100 or so standard reports from ENFOS, and if I want to validate the data or see the base data, I would need to run one of these reports to get that export. So we've got another question. Can we change the output to something like a tabular report that just needs columns and rows to get the data? Yes. So let's take a look at an example of that. So we looked at the crosstab and the chart views already, but let's create a new ad hoc in a table view. So the table view would be like the existing ENFOS reports, which are just columns and rows. And that can all be done actually going to go back and select the site information data again. So I've selected my site information data set. And when we go to the new ad hoc creator, it defaults to this crosstab view. There's a third one called table. And the table view changes our options from columns and rows to columns and groups. And at this point, I can go in and create a standard report based on whatever fields and measures I drag into the top here. So I've got site city, site country, site created date. I don't think anyone's really using facts anymore. But we can do things like add site references. This dummy data doesn't happen to have the site reference. I could also add things like, what are my vendors? Let's do a primary vendor instead of a secondary vendor. So that's the easiest way to get a just standard columns and rows report from ENFOS. And then this data can be exported once it's saved as a report or to a dashboard. Some more questions have come in here. What is the process ability to link data sets? For example, if we want to pull different data types into one ad hoc view, but currently can't. So the ability to link the data sets is called a table join, or data set join, and that's a request that you guys can send to us. So send those requests to the bisupport@enfos.com, and we've got a list of things we already want to do, and we'll prioritize your request within that list. So that may be things like a data set that we're working on is your additional information. So any additional information that's at the site or AOC level will have their own custom data sets, and we'll link those to the site and AOC information. But you may want to link the additional information to your invoice data, and that would be a request that you would send to us so that we can insert a join between those data sets. And our next question is actually about additional information as a source. So yes, additional information will become a data set, and we are working on that. That's a slower one for us because all of our clients have different additional information. So we'll be releasing those one by one. So if that's something that's incredibly important to you to have access to those data sets, send us a note and we'll create a prioritized list of who's requesting data sets for their additional information. So we've still got another 20 minutes or so. We'll hang around to answer any questions, but I don't have any more questions coming in. So if there's any questions about the BI memo, our dates, or any of the existing dashboards that are in production, feel free to send us questions. We can take a look at those or look at more filters, mapping parameters. But we'll give it 5 minutes here, and if we don't have any more questions come in, we'll end the webinar. So thank you everyone for joining, and for any BI questions, comments, concerns, if you're jumping at the bit to get your additional information as a data set, send us an email at that bisupport@enfos.com email address. We've got another question that just came in to quickly review the permissions again. So those are under each one of your users' accounts, but they're managed under the Administration User Management Privilege Group section. And there's two permissions. They're both under the Admin section, and they're called the BI Admin and the Data Insights. The BI Admin allows users to save and edit ad hocs, reports, and dashboards, both for their own private folder and for a public folder, as well as other users' private folders. Whereas the Data Insights permission allows you to restrict users to only have view access or give them the ability to create and save their own reports, ad hocs, and dashboards to their private folder. All right, we've got one last question, and that's just a reminder about the age of the data. So production will always use data from yesterday. So every night, ENFOS takes a copy of the production data, denormalizes it onto a BI server, and the data can then be reported on. So if you make changes like approve invoices or approve purchase orders, change site information, change contacts or which project managers are assigned to the portfolio, that information all becomes reportable the next day. You can still run the ENFOS standard reports same day as soon as you load that information, but for the Data Insights module, there's the 24-hour lag for us to denormalize that data set. And one last note here, the test system is a copy of production from early January 2019. So if you do use test.enfos.com, then that data it has all of 2018's data and just the first week or two of January's data. Got another question here. What do you do when you denormalize the data? So denormalizing the data is when we take all of these separate ENFOS data sets that production is built off of, and we break down, or we break apart what makes them unique. And that allows us to create sort of one master database where we can cross-reference fields and measures that otherwise would not be reportable together. So that's what we mean when we say denormalize. Whereas a normalized data set would be like just your invoice report would be a normalized data set. We've got another question here. Do you think in the future if we'll have real-time denormalized data to get up-to-date BI information? I mean, I would certainly hope so. I mean, that's definitely a future enhancement for us, since we're taking all of your data and moving it into separate denormalized databases overnight. That's a long process for us. And we would love to see it in real time, but currently there's the 1 day lag on it. Got another question about the data joins. And yes, so we are joining the data, and that's how we have access to the different data sets that can be used together. So an example of a data join, if I create a new ad hoc, and I select my AOC information 9 data set, I can see that the invoice summary and invoice with WBS data sets did not gray out like the others. So there is a join between the AOC information and the invoice summary information. I don't know what field is joined off the top of my head. It may be one or more, but it's these joins that you can send us requests for, and we'll prioritize them to allow you to cross-reference specific fields within ENFOS. As far as help information and a guide to BI, they're not available yet, but they are things that we're working on. So closer to stage 2 of the BI Data Insights release, which is coming up in July, we'll have more information that we can distribute on how to navigate BI, how to use BI, how to build ad hocs and dashboards and everything we've gone over on this call, as well as information on what data sets are available and what those table joins are within the data sets. And once again, this webinar is being recorded, so we'll be making it available on our ENFOS YouTube page, which you all have direct access to from the information submodule under the tutorial videos section. So all of these training already exist, including Tori's series of expert webinars, like Excelling with Compliance here at the bottom, which is the latest one. And she's doing an additional webinar coming up in just a week or so on the ENFOS mobile apps. So we do have the mobile app in both iOS, so for you Apple users, and Android users now. So Tori will be doing an expert series on the ENFOS mobile apps for those that are interested. And Tori, what is that date? Wednesday. And that's coming up on next Wednesday, the 3rd. Okay. I'd like to thank everyone again for taking the time to join us today. If you have any questions about BI, send them over to bisupport@enfos.com, and we're excited to roll this out. So we'll keep in touch. We'll be sending you more information as we release additional dashboards to production, and there'll be more memos, I'm sure, about stage 2 once we get closer to that point. Thanks, everybody.